So in this video, I want to show you a very simple way of doing your line drawings before you start to oil paint. The only tool we're going to be using is just a brush, and we're going to be measuring by holding our thumb, and this is one point, and then this is another. So we can measure like that any distance we want. And I'm going to show you how to do this. It's really simple, and anybody can do it. You don't need any drawing ability or anything else. Let's start by looking at this little still life here, and this would be, you could do this method with a portrait or a landscape or anything else, but we're going to just use this still life as an example. And the very first thing I've got to decide is I'm going to pick one object in this still life that's just some largish object, not something real teeny, not something that's massive, but something that's just normal, medium-sized object, and I'm going to take the plum on the left side of this still life. Now, the very first thing I've got to do is decide how big that plum should be and where I want to place it on the canvas. And that's going to be up to you. If you make it really big, you're not going to have room for the rest of the objects because you'll run out of room on whatever size canvas you have. So take the canvas that you have, decide where you want to put that plum, and just give it your best guess. And now we're going to put a mark where the bottom of that plum is. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a mark where the right-hand side of that plum is. So the bottom of the plum is going to be here, and then the right-hand side is going to be indicated by this mark. So now we have what I call two golden lines, and we're going to reference these lines for the rest of our time that we're drawing this still life. So the bottom line is going to run underneath the plum, and it's going to run all the way across the canvas. The vertical line is going to run right along the edge side of the plum, the right side of the plum, and it's going to run from the top of the canvas to the bottom. And you don't have to draw these lines all the way across like I have, but I've just drawn in these golden lines because it just makes it easier. Okay, so now that we've got the position of this plum, we need to decide how big it should be. And again, if you make it too big, you're going to run out of space for the rest of the stuff. If you make it too small, you're going to have a bunch of empty canvas on the edges. So through trial and error, decide how big your plum should be. And you can take a measurement of that plum and then just go across your canvas and kind of count out, if that's a good size or not. If it's too big, then you can make it a little smaller and then just measure again and just kind of get your bearings as to what size that plum should be so that the rest of the stuff can fit in. Now, once you've decided how big it is, now we've got our vertical golden line, which is the right-hand edge of the plum. We've got a horizontal golden line, which runs under the plum. And then we've got a little mark indicating where we want the top of the plum to be. So now we've got everything we need to do all of our measuring for the rest of the still life. So we're going to start with the width of this plum. So we're going to take a measurement from the height of the plum, and then we're going to rotate it and compare that to the width, looking at the still life. And as you can see, the width is just ever so slightly wider than the height. So we'll measure that out, and we're just going to put our little mark for the width just slightly beyond. So now we have 4 marks, and we know exactly where that plum's going to be, and we can draw it in a minute, but that is where the plum's going to go. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to plot the other 2 plums across the canvas. So we're going to take one measurement of the height of the plum with our brush, then we're going to turn that sideways, and we're going to count 3 plums, 1, 2, 3, and as you can see, when we're looking at the still life, that's almost exactly 3. In fact, it's pretty much exactly 3 widths of the first plum across will get you to the beginning of those 2 plums. Then I go back to my canvas and I take a measurement of the 2 marks so that here's my height of the plum. I turn that sideways and I count off 3 heights of the plum across, and that tells me where the second set of plums go. Okay, so now I've got that mark in. So now the next thing I need to do is to determine where the bottom of that first plum is, the one on the left of the 2. And as you can see, according to my golden line, it's ever so slightly just above that horizontal line. So I'm just going to put a little mark ever so slightly above that golden line, and that's going to be where the bottom of the plum is, the one on the left. Now I want to measure the width of the 2 plums together. So I'll take a measurement from the height of the original plum, and then I'll turn it sideways, and I'll count off. And as you can see, it's about 1.9, not quite 2 plums across. So now I go back to my canvas, I take a measurement of the height of the plum, and I go over and I measure it out, and I put that mark right at about the 1.9. And that is the measurement of the height of the plum. So we count off 2, and then we go slightly less, and that gets us to about 1.9. So that's about the width of the 2 plums together. Now I want to determine where that line is that divides these 2 plums. So I could take a height measurement from the original plum, turn it sideways, and measure. And as you can see, it comes to about 1.1 heights of the original plum. So I'll just measure that out on the canvas, and then I'll make a mark slightly beyond that measurement, which gets me to about 1.1 for that width. Okay, now that I've got all those measurements in and I've got basically 3 little boxes where I know my plums go, I can just go ahead and sketch those in. Now I might, notice where the top of the plum hits, and it might be slightly off center or whatever it is, but basically we've got 3 little squares that now you can sketch those plums in. Now we're going to just use that same process to do the rest of the still life. So we'll put in some indication where the flower is, where the bottom is, where the top, left, right, and we're going to use that same process, always taking your measurement from the original plum, and that height measurement is your measurement. So you'll take that, turn it sideways, and count across from your golden line, and you can mark your points. And then once you've got your 4 points in, we can draw that flower. Then we can draw a little circle in the middle of it. Some of these things you can measure, but other things might be too small to really measure, so you just have to really just draw. But you're going to measure as much as you can and plot as many points as you can. And as you can see, as I finish this still life, just putting in all my marks, always going back to the golden lines to measure, both the horizontal and the vertical, but also always using that first plum's height as your measurement. That is 1 unit, you could say, 1 plum height unit, and you will measure that to plot every one of these points on this still life. And then once you got a few points in, you can just sketch in whatever it is inside those points. So that's a basic way that you draw freehand. I hope that's helpful. It's actually very easy once you get used to it, and it's amazing how accurate this can be. So I do teach a method for penciling that's a lot more, using a proportion divider, and it's real precise. And if you've never drawn before, you might want to try that. You can go to my, in the description of this video, I'll put a link to my how to draw in proportion video, which is a lot more measuring. But this simple way is exactly how I would do when I used to do portraits from life, or whenever I paint still lifes from life, I use that same basic method. And it works really well. It's amazing how accurate it can be. Well, thank you so much for watching. I wanted to tell you I've got this little landscape painting that I finished a couple years ago, and it's been hanging in my studio, and I've decided to sell it. Normally this would sell for about $10,000 in a gallery based on my current prices, but I'm going to sell it for $5,000 to whoever wants to buy it. If you're interested, send an email to mark@drawmixpaint.com, and we will see if we can arrange a sale. Thank you so much for watching. Go check out our paint supply company, genevafineart.com, where we have solvent-free paint and the #1 easel in the world. Thank you for watching. See you guys next time.